Just think of it as the rough draft of the podcast world. This is the Newbie Writers Podcast with your hosts, Damien Boak and Catherine Bramkamp.
Hey, this is episode 173, I think, of the Newbie Writers Podcast. And we're going to do something a bit different today. Catherine's somewhere. New York, I think. That's right. She wanted me to give a shout out to her BFF. Who uses the term BFF these days anyway?
Catherine.
And so hopefully she's having fun doing something or other. So I've got Dion to fill those big shoes.
Yes, hello. How's it going?
We're not going to have you squawking on this show, are we?
Not today.
Well,
no,
we'll see
no,
where it
I haven't
goes.
got any squawks in me today.
Sad when the most feedback we get from your last show was, I love the squawking.
I'll just have to do different animal noises every episode that I'm on and see if that's what the people are listening for.
This is not the Newbie Nature Show.
Yeah.
What a cool idea. Anyway, too much to organise. But we're going to talk about something a little bit different. We're going to talk about the business of writing. That's what I want to get into. I want to find out how it all works. It's all well and good you can sit down and write the thing, but how do you sell it? How do you get it out there? So we've got Robin Sullivan on. Good morning, afternoon, night. I don't know.
Evening.
Evening. That's another word for it. It's like the walking thesaurus. So welcome to the show. What do you do?
Thank you.
No.
What do you do?
What do you do? Just, you've got an hour talk. I'll come back and hit cancel.
So I'm the business manager of Michael J. Sullivan. He's a best-selling fantasy author. He's got 9 books released. He just signed a contract for another 4. We've self-published, we've small press published, we've big 5 published. Michael earns full-time income from his writing and has for a number of years now. So we've kind of done a little bit of everything. So I handle anything that is not creative. So that's working with the agents, working with publishers, doing the self-publishing, marketing, anything on the business side is what I handle.
Right. So a lot of our listeners, which are new authors trying to get out there, are probably hating your husband right now, because they're
not hating.
They
him.
have to do everything, and he's obviously very lucky to have someone like you to go and do all the hard bits. Let's be honest.
That's true.
That's true. Come on, we should have him on as well. I think I can, grill him about the creative side of things. But you can't ignore that once you've got a book or even a starting one, that you do have to do the other side of things. You have to approach those publishers. But before we get into that, how did you get into doing this then?
My background actually is I'm an electrical engineer by training. I've run several companies over many years. My most recent company that I was dealt with was an advertising agency that me and my husband were running. And his lifelong dream had been to write. And he tried for, about 10 years, didn't get anywhere, quit for over a decade. And then he said to me one day, I really want to go back and try writing again. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. He says, but I don't want to publish. He says, I've tried that and it's just depressing and I'm tired of the rejections. I'm just going to write a book that I want to read and that we can have our daughter read and maybe some friends, and that's it. And I was like, well, honey, if that's what would make you happy, that's fine with me. I made a good enough income that we didn't need 2 incomes. So he started writing again. And then when I read the 3rd book of his series, I said, honey, these really have to get out into the world. They really need to be published. And he says, I'm not going to go there. So it fell upon me to, get them out there. Because he had just become so disillusioned with publishing in general that he wasn't going to do it. And I just felt very strongly that they needed to be told. So I did everything from that point on and kind of have been doing it ever since.
He's very lucky to have you.
Yeah. Like I said, people are going to be groaning now. Going, I wish I had a wife that would do all that. Do you find, though, that the fact that he didn't have that goal of saying, I'm going to write a book to become famous, I'm going to write a book to earn squillions of dollars and travel the world, meant that his book was probably a little bit better, a little bit more honest, because the drive behind it was, I'm doing this for me, I'm doing this for my family, and that's it.
Well, I think there certainly is something to be said about that. I mean, his first stance in publishing, which happened, serious work on writing started when he was about 20 and ran till he was like 32. And in those times, he was trying to write books that he thought would be marketable. I mean, that's, he wanted to be a published author, so he was kind of focusing on those. And, he liked what he was writing, but maybe he just didn't feel it in his toes.
Yeah.
Now, when he started writing the books that we eventually did get published, part of the reason was our daughter is very dyslexic and she was having a hard time with reading. And when he was very young, he wasn't a reader at all. But it was fantasy that got him interested. His brother had read Tolkien's work to him, and that kind of got him excited. And he thought, well, I'm going to write a story that hopefully will get Sarah excited about reading, and then maybe she'll turn into a reader. And that ended up happening.
Oh.
But again, the book that he wrote probably wouldn't do very well in publishing in fantasy these days, because his is a more heroic fantasy at a time when kind of George R.R. Martin and Joe Abercrombie, kind of the darker fantasy, is very popular. So I don't think it generally would have been very well received, because it was kind of like a throwback to classic fantasy as opposed to kind of like what's around now. But we find that the readers are really saying that it's very fresh and very different. And yes, it's not exactly like classic fantasy. It's got a kind of a twist on it, but it's it didn't really fit into the cookie cutter of traditional publishing, I don't think.
Not much does.
Well,
to be honest.
No, this is true.
And you know what? I mean, as you know, because you're in there trying to sell his books to publishers, that it's not necessarily the content that ends up, like whether the content's good or not. It's whether their marketing department and their accounting department thinks they can make money out of it. So it's not always what the editor wants. It's what other people who actually don't care about the book think they can make money out of, which is depressing. But anyway.
That is true.
Not that Dion's been through that at all before.
Yeah.
So tell us, were you hugged as a child?
Yeah. No, well, it's business, isn't it? Everything's about money, unfortunately, which is why self-publishing is such a good thing. It's allowed people to put stuff out there that they want to read, as your husband wanted to do, and there is an audience for it.
Yes, there is.
Well, exactly. Like Michael's agent is also an agent of some other people we know, and they operate a little bit different than Michael does, because they'll come up with an idea and they'll pitch it to the agent, and if the agent says, yeah, I think I can sell that, they go off and write the book. Michael, on the other hand, he just writes whatever book he wants, and he gives it to the agent, and if the agent can't sell it, he says, well, okay, then I will self-publish it if you don't think it has a market. And so he really has the best of both worlds, because he has the opportunity to go either way. Right now, we tend to be, we're a little bit more, well, a lot more on the traditional side. I mean, there was a time when we were 100% self-published, but that's kind of shifted because we've gotten some really good offers that we really couldn't pass up. But we're about to.
Sorry, I just want to ask a question. How are you, or how is he finding the time it takes the traditional publishers to get a book out compared to when you're self-published? You do it fairly quickly compared to traditional publishers. How is he adjusting to that?
Well, so it's interesting, because his first series that was published, it was 6 books, and he wrote all of those before publishing them at all. And we had self-published the first 5, and we generally put them out on a 6-month schedule. One in April, one in October, one in April, one in October. And by the time, and as we released the 5th book, that's when I decided to give New York a try again. And so we put the feelers out and got a contract. Now, the publisher that picked him up was the fantasy imprint of Hachette Book Group. And because all the books were written, they actually did something that most publishers don't do, in the respects that they put them out back to back to back. So they put out 6 books in like 60 days, something like that. I think it was 38 days from the first one to the last one. So he didn't have to experience kind of that, the standard like year wait between books. But they were only put out in trade paperback. Now, the publishing contract that he just signed, which is with a different publisher, that's with Random House's Del Rey imprint. They are going to be doing the 1 a year book release. And one of the things that I had to spend a lot of time working on is getting a non-compete written in a way that he could release his books in between their books. So even though they're only putting out books once a year, he can still self-publish books in between those.
Which is a good idea, because if he's got loyal readers, they want as much of his stuff as they can get. So it's only going to benefit everybody. Yeah.
We can't, that's kind of one of the hardest things, kind of arranging when you're doing hybrid, because the Del Rey contract, it's very large. It's more than $500,000. And so they're going to be putting a lot of marketing into that series. So we can't have our books too close to theirs, because it would undercut what they're doing. And that's a little bit hard for self-publishers to kind of deal with, because they're just used to releasing anything they want, anytime they want. But so we're working through that now. Talk to me in 4 years when this is all rolled out, and then I'll tell you whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. But with the right cooperation and by working with a publisher, I think we've come up with a good compromise that will work for both us and them.
And did they get the ebook rights as well?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Did they get both the ebook rights and the paperback rights?
Yes. Interestingly enough, we do have a print-only deal with one publisher, which I'll talk about in a moment. But for the most part, the Big Five is never going to divorce off the ebook rights. Michael's ebooks are actually about 65% of his print ebook sales. So the print-only is 35% of that. So the ebooks are actually the bigger rights. And, there's only a very few authors who have been able to get a very large publisher to, allow them to keep the ebook rights. Hugh Howey got it for his Wool series with Simon & Schuster. And a couple of the big romance authors, Bella Andre is one of them. She was able to negotiate a print-only deal. But these people sell in the millions of copies. And, if you have that kind of sales, you kind of write your own ticket. What we did for a science fiction novel of Michael's called Hollow World, we were self-publishing that, but we still wanted to get it into the bookstore. So we ended up finding a smaller press. The Big Five would not give us a print-only deal, but we did find a smaller press, Tachyon Publications, and they put out the print book while we put out the ebook. So that can be done a little bit here and there, but you've got to have kind of a good track record for it to make it worth the publishers worthwhile, because they know they're going to be losing a lot of sales because they're not going to have that. But Michael has enough sales. Otherwise, this publisher thought that, he would earn well enough with just the print book. So he took a chance on that.
Do you think that because you come from that business background, you're not really attached to the core of the writing of the book, you don't have that emotion into it, that it is a bit easier to sort of deal with publishers just from a business to business point of view? Because a lot of authors are hanging on, I've written, this is my baby, here, have it. Whereas you can sort of come in and go, right, from a business point of view, I need this, this, and this, or what can you offer?
Well, it's interesting. I wish we had video right now, because you'd see me kind of grinning ear to ear. I'm probably much more protective of Michael's writing than he is. What I'm always looking, there's a couple things that I need to kind of keep forefront when I'm dealing with the business side of things. One is, the non-compete. The non-compete is very difficult to negotiate, and it's probably what when contracts come up, it's probably what I spend 90% of my time on. It's very difficult to finagle that because publishers just aren't used to, hybrid authors that do both self-publishing and traditional. But the other thing that I always have to advocate for is to make sure that no one can change the book without Michael's approval. So I spent a lot of time looking for wording such as, adaptations. Don't like that word. Never signed a contract with that. Things where, like in this last contract, there was a little line that said something like, nothing, no changes, but copy editing can be done after, the structural edits are completed. And I'm like, wait a minute, Michael won't even allow that. Yes, it's copywritten, but he has to approve, those copy edits.
Yeah.
So, and these days, the thing that I'm most interested in, and I've actually had to work the hardest on, is audio rights, because Michael does very, very well in audio, and the audio publishers have been very, very good to him. And the first contract, the agent who negotiated that, I said, we want to keep the audio rights back. At that time, we said, well, I really thought it was because they wouldn't exercise them, and I figured I'd rather have something that I might do something with than to have a right with a publisher who won't do anything with it. And she couldn't hold it back, and they ended up doing it as a subsidiary right. And then the second contract came along, and I told her the same thing. I said, I got to keep the audio rights. And she said, no, the publisher won't let you keep them. You got to turn them over. So then I was like, there's got to be another way to do this. So for the next book, or the next series, I actually went and sold the audio rights first.
Clever.
So that when the time came to negotiate the rights, I was like, well, you can't have the audio rights. They're already gone. Now, that was a big gamble, because they could have said, well, without the audio rights, we're not interested at all. And in fact, there were, I think, 5 or 6 publishers who were interested in this series. And one of them did indeed say that. They said, we aren't interested without the audio rights. But the other 4 were fine with it. So that didn't turn out to be too much of a problem.
It's like cutting your nose off to spite your face. I mean, if they're going to make money out of, with digital books now, they're going to make money if it's an author that sells well. They're just being ridiculous if they have to have everything.
Well, the thing of it is, they get 50% of the audio income for doing essentially nothing. All they do is sign a contract. So that's, and in Michael's case, that's, the numbers, I haven't seen the most recent numbers, but the numbers are getting pretty close to the point where their 50% of the audio rights have almost earned them back his whole advance that they paid him. So they basically, completely subsidize those. Oh, and the other thing that I'm a big stickler on is foreign rights. I never sell foreign rights with the main contract. Because we make a lot of money on foreign sales. So I keep that separate too.
Do you ever have a publisher just say, oh, just rack off? We want someone who can just, like I said before, like some authors are so keen to be published. They get the contract, like, yeah, ooh, yes, and just sign. Whereas, you take the time to pick things through. Some of them think, oh, she's picking everything to pieces. It's not worth it.
Yeah, I am a pain in the butt. I will say that. And for 2 of the 3 contracts I've negotiated, I was pretty sure in very long stretches of them that we would never get it signed.
Yeah.
And you need to know like what you'll put up with and what you won't. The non-compete in his first contract was an absolute deal killer. There was no question. We could never sign it no matter. It was a nice 6-figure contract, but we couldn't sign it no matter what the money was, because the way that the non-compete was written was, and it, by the way, it was totally illegal, but who's going to go to court to fight it? But they basically said something along this lines. During the term of this contract, and this was a life of copyright contract. During the term of this contract, the author will not write any work that shall compete with these works. And compete is defined to be, any work that would injure the sales of these works. And I'm like, well, that means anything he writes, like exactly. The rest of his life. So, there was just no way. And I fought that for like 5 months. And the agent said, look, that is standard non-compete language. It's in all the contracts. Everyone signs it. It's never enforced. It's just,
well, why is it there then?
Well, that's what I said, right? And she said, well, look, this is not something that Orbit can control. This is a Hachette clause, and they're not going to be able to change it. I said, look, I can't sign it. And then she brought in a famous IP attorney, and he pulled me contracts from all the big sixes. It was big six at the time. And, read me their non-competes, which were all very similar. And he says, this is just a part of doing business. This, Stephen King signs this. Everyone signs this. I said, well, I can't sign it. I just can't. It's just, and the reason, by the way, it's illegal is, at least here in the United States, you can have a non-compete clause, but it has to be short-lived and very narrowly focused geographically. Like you can say to a salesperson, you can't go work for your competitor's company, for 6 months.
Yeah.
But life of copyright, that's way too long. And it would have been struck down in a court. But again, are you going to fight it? So the interesting thing with that one was, and here's the thing, because they fought it for so long. And the only thing I could come to the conclusion is that they figured no author who had started out self-publishing, who had been offered a big 5 contract with a 6-figure advance, there's no way he's going to walk away. He's going to cave on this. He's going to sign it. He won't walk away. And I told the agent, I said, this is not a negotiation tactic. This, we'll have to walk away. And in fact, I was out on some forums and I was trying to learn about non-competes and, what different people had and stuff like this. And one person wrote back on the forum, they said, let me get this straight. Are you telling this open forum that if your husband's non-compete doesn't get, addressed, he's going to not sign this contract? And I said, I'm absolutely telling you that. And he says, and the other person said, well, you're an idiot. What if the publisher sees this? And I'm like, will you please point the publisher to this? Because this is not, this is not a negotiation technique. This is what it is. And we finally got defanged to the point where we could sign it. But I mean, for at least, the agent said they're not going to change it. The IP attorney said they're not going to change it. They both told me you have to sign it. And we just couldn't. So
you have some power because you know how much you can earn from his books, and you get a hell of a bigger percentage of the sale price, and you could have probably earned more than that advance in a year, and you knew that. So you did have some power, and you could walk away and still earn a living out of it.
Without question. And that was kind of the saving grace in all this. Like if we hadn't self-published before, if we had gone through the query go-round and gotten to the contract that way, we would have signed. We would have signed it the way it was. I know we would have. But, fortunately, having that prior self-publishing knowledge, we didn't have to sign. We weren't.
I think it's good now with the self-publishing because the authors they do have more power.
They do.
Because you do it yourself. And I think there's a lot more authors that are questioning contracts and saying, well, is it really worth it to me to give away, all this income in the hopes that they're going to do enough marketing to sell more books than what I sell now? And what do you have to sell 3, 4, 5 times more books with a publisher to earn the same money? And if you're, selling 10, 20,000 books a year, you are making a living out of it already.
Yeah, without question. And the thing of that is, I would like to say that self-publishing has completely changed the landscape, and now the shift of power has gone to the author. Unfortunately, it has not. the contracts are still very, very weighted towards the publisher. And every time we sign a contract, I mean, we know exactly kind of like what we've given up, and it's more than we should be giving up in a true partnership relationship. And that's just, that's the reality. And it comes down to, is it worth it to you, to have that? And for us, it has been. I mean, one of the things that I track is Goodreads is a site that we see a lot of. We can see like kind of Michael's fan base from a standpoint of like how many people have shelved the books, and how many people had friended him, and how many followers he has and stuff like that. And if you look at his pre Big Five contract and post Big Five contract, I mean, there's no question that it was the right thing to do. I mean, his numbers went up exponentially, and that was for a trade paperback release. Now, one of the things with this most recent series, the question was, did a publisher ever just tell you, just no, we're not going to do what you say? Yes, in some respects, because the publisher he was with, they had come down from New York to have a lunch meeting and stuff, and they said, well, why do you want to be traditionally published? You're so gung-ho on the self-publishing. I said, I want one thing. I want the next series to be released in hardcovers. And that's not something I can easily do in self-publishing. It's very expensive. Trying to get in the distribution network is very hard. And I just thought that taking him to hardcovers would elevate his career to the next level. And so that was kind of my line in the sand. And this particular publisher said, no, we don't think it's time to move him from trade paperback to hardcover. If we publish him, we'll continue to do it in trade paperback. And so there was no sense even discussing anything further at that point, because I had no interest in a trade paperback. I can do trade paperback through self-publishing. Like I said, that wasn't a problem with the other publishers. The other publisher said, yeah, why wouldn't they do you in hardcover? Michael's definitely got an audience that he should be moving up to hardcover. And so they saw that as the logical move. So yeah, I mean, Michael's earned back his advance 3.5 times over with Orbit, and his sales are still going strong. But that wasn't enough for them to concede to the format choice that we wanted. So we had to part ways.
I have a question. There was obviously a time when you just first released the books as a self-publisher. How long did it take, and what was the tipping point where his books took off? How long was it?
Yeah, so I always tell authors that 3 is kind of the magic number. If you have just one book out, it's nearly impossible to earn any money, and 2, it's not much easier. But by the time you get 3 books out, what happens there is, the amount of time and effort it takes in marketing to kind of capture a reader, and this, of course, is assuming that you have a good product, because if you don't have that, you kind of don't have anything. But if you have 3 books out, then when you kind of get that reader, you're getting 3 sales from them. And, they're telling other people and so forth. So 3 is kind of a magic number. Now, when Mike had 3 books on the market, now this was a long time ago. I mean, we're talking back in 2008, 2009. I think when there were 3 books on the market, he was doing about 500 books a month across those 3 titles.
That's good.
And he was priced at $4.95. He was higher than, because I didn't know better. But so he was priced at $4.95, and that made us some decent supplemental income. And then when the 4th book came out, we were doing about 800 books a month. And by the time, and right before the 5th book came out, we had kind of gotten up to 1,000 books a month.
That's
and
pretty good.
Pretty good. And at that time, like I said, they were at $4.95. And then the 5th book hit the market in October of 2010. And for a lark, I put that at $6.95. I thought I would have huge backlash on price. And
yeah, I was going to say that's a bit That's a bit mean.
Bit cheeky.
Well, I thought it was worth. I thought it was worth more than that, actually. But I thought that was a reasonable price, and we did not hear one squeak. Nobody said anything about the price at all. And the first half of that month, the first half of October, I could see that the month-end sales for October was going to be about 2,600 copies across the 5 titles. And it was right at that moment, that we were reshopping the series to New York. And we had a couple different publishers who were interested in it. Orbit made a really nice preempt offer. And they were kind of the publisher we really wanted to be with. We liked a lot of things about what they were saying about how they were going to roll the books out back to back. Mm-hmm. And they had really good covers, and they had good authors in their stables and so forth. So we took that preempt. So at the time they, kind of bought him up, I mean, he was selling about 1,000 to 2,000 books a month. And then November hit. And so the deal hadn't been announced. Nobody knew about it, obviously. Mm-hmm. And November 2010 was a big month for a lot of the self-published authors. That was the big month for Amanda Hawking and Joe Conrath. And there were kind of a lot of authors who did really well that particular month. John Locke. Michael was at the very bottom of those. I mean, he was he had next to no sales compared to what they had, but he did just shy of 10,000 sales in November. Jeez. And they were priced $495 to $695. So do the math. That's a lot of money came in.
What marketing were you doing for him to get him noticed in the first place?
Well, so every time we released a new book, because we were putting the books out every 6 months, it's just as my marketing efforts for the previous book just started to wane, then another book would hit, and that would kind of boost it up again. Mm-hmm. But in October, it's probably the smartest thing I ever did. Now, this was back in the day. This was long before Select, and, mm-hmm. there was no way to make your book free. Well, there was. It was a little trick that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't, which is you put one copy for free somewhere else, and then you tell Amazon that it's for free, and then they price match it.
Oh, you still do that now. You have to do that now.
They still do. That still happens now. It's not guaranteed. They won't always do it. But because I had this new book coming out, the smartest thing I ever did was I took the second book in his series and made it free for 3 weeks. Okay. And so what happened, obviously, is people saw the free book and they bought it and they went, oh, wait, this is book 2. I'll just go out and I buy book 1. So book 1 sales went really high up. And then, the books do have an incredible word of mouth. I mean, that word of mouth is the only thing that will ever get success to a books. I mean, period. I mean, you can discount, you can give stuff away, but if people aren't telling other people about the books, it's just not going to go anywhere.
Well, it's like any business, really, isn't it? I grow my business purely from word of mouth. I had someone ask me what my marketing budget was, and I went 0.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't need to.
We didn't spend anything on marketing either. I mean, we put that one book for free for 3 weeks. And this is really so I'm sorry. So November the sales were over 10,000. January they were over 11,000. February they were over 12,000. And then March came, and then that's when we announced the Orbit deal. Although I must tell you, so we actually got the contract for the Orbit deal in March. So I had basically 4 months of plus 10,000.
I was going to say, you might have been going to, I really want to sign this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we were $490 because those books at the time were priced $495 to $695. We had more than $10,000 a month. And I was like, if we sign this contract, we're going to lose about $250,000 easily. And my husband, he was like, I think this would be good for my career. I don't care how much money we're going to lose on it. I think this is going to elevate my career. He says, show me the store where I can go and pay $250,000 and get the type of of validity stamp that I'm going to get by making this deal. And, because he was fighting it's a really good book for a self-published author. There was always that qualifier, this is really good for a self-published author. And that gets a little tiring after a while. So it turns out we did not lose that money because A, Mike's books sold much higher than kind of my spreadsheet said they would. And B, he had a lot of foreign sales, and I don't think he would have gotten the same kinds of foreign deals if he had stayed self-published. He would have gotten some of them, some of the smaller ones, like the Czech Republic had come in before he'd gone traditional, and there was another one, I can't remember what it was, but the really big overseas sales, the German, the French, Russia, those types of deals, you really needed kind of the traditional deal to get those. So if you tack on all the money from the overseas sales and the fact that his books sold much higher than I thought they did, we actually ended up making much more money traditionally published than you can't tell for sure unless you had a alternate reality machine to kind of do both. But I'm a pretty good number cruncher, and I do think that we ended up making more money traditionally.
Well, question on that. We've had a listener who's in our Google Hangout. I'm going to slaughter his name. Hartim? Anyway, we'll call you Bruce for now. He says, what are the benefits of signing with a publisher over self-publishing? For that newbie that's sitting there on that balance going, do I just self-publish this, or do I go and start that business and hit the traditional?
Yeah. So, both routes are completely viable. And it's really not a matter of like one over the other. It really depends on the author. Like I've talked to authors who have said, I just won't feel like a real author unless I see my books on bookstore shelves. Now, Michael didn't feel that way. But for authors who do feel that way, I don't begrudge that of them at all. I mean, if that's their goal, that's their goal. I mean, it's a perfectly legitimate thing to say. So, of course, for them, traditional is going to be the way to do it. For us, as far as like what our goals and so forth were, what we really wanted was to, and it's going to sound really stupid, but I'm going to say it. We really wanted that stamp of validity. We wanted to be able to break that for a tradition, for a self-published author thing. So for us, that, I don't know if you want to call it stigma, but that was important for us to get by, and that was our main motivating factor. But the traditionally published, and again, with traditionally published, you got to kind of put them in two different camps, because Michael is he's getting his debut contract and the contracts he's gotten since then are not at the level that most new authors are going to get.
That's
most
what
new
I was
authors
going to say. You were very successful before. You're 1 in a million type of thing. The normal person is lucky to get a $5,000 advance, if anything.
Precisely. So it's a much different thing, right? So for most authors, like if you're going to get that $5,000 to $10,000 advance, your book is not going to get the attention that Michael's book gets at a 6-figure advance. So you're not going to get as much marketing support. So a lot of people will say, oh, well, I'm going to traditionally publish because of marketing. Well, first of all, the way we treat marketing is, yes, Michael, because of the size of Michael's contracts, he does get honest to goodness marketing help with his books, but we treat that as kind of gravy. We don't really think about that as, we treat the marketing activities the same, whether they're self-published or traditionally published. We do the exact same things. We treat it the exact same ways. If the publisher does something as well, okay, good, that's gravy. They'll get it into NetGalley and we wouldn't pay for NetGalley. So yay, good, or they'll, they'll pay some co-op dollars to get it in the bookstores faced out. Yay, good, but we're still doing the same activities that we would either way. So for us, when I hear authors say, well, I'm going traditional because I want that marketing machine of the publishers behind me. Well, first of all, most don't get that. Right. But two, you have to do the same things either way. So for me, that aspect can kind of be taken off. But here's the real, to me, here's the real kind of crux of whether you should go self or traditional. And that is, I'm a firm believer that if you're going to self-publish, it is imperative that you put out a product that has every bit of quality that comes out of a New York house. And that means, beautiful covers, impeccable editing, great marketing material, blurbs written for them on the back of the book and things of that nature. Well priced. The titles are thought about very carefully, as opposed to just slapping something on there. I mean, you really think about keywords and metadata, and does this sound like it fits the audience that you're trying to hit, and so forth. So the problem is, you have to be able to do that. And the biggest part of that, in my mind, actually, is the structural editing. One of the things that really traditional publishers have that I think is very hard for self-publishers is the structural editors that the houses have are A, very good, and B, they can really only work for them. Copy editing, they do outsource, and you can hire the same copy editors that they do, so that's easy. But the structural editors actually work for the publishers, and they aren't allowed to freelance. So if you're going to self-publish, then you have to be able to get that structural editing elsewhere. I don't suggest buying it, because the people who would say they're structural editors are A, going to be very expensive, and B, is a very subjective type of editing, and they might make a book worse rather than better. And I'll go back to A again, which is it's very expensive. I know structural editors that charge $200 an hour. That's not uncommon. And so a self-published author has to really kind of make their book, polish it and get that structural editing somewhere else. Now, you can do that through beta readers. You can do that through critique partners. You can do that by sharing it with other authors. If you can't do that on your own, if you can't get your book kind of in really good shape on your own, then traditional is the way to go, because they'll do it for you. And I just think it's really hard to do it elsewhere. So the one thing that I think traditional publishing really still holds is they kind of give you that stamp of validity, and they give you the structural editing that if you can't do that on your own, most books generally need it. And so you got to get it from somewhere.
So drawing your own cover is probably not the best way to go. Dion's giggling because there was a person, I'm not going to name names, that hand drew their cover and posted it up on a social media thing and said, "What do you think?" And
it was awful.
I basically said, "I think it looks really unprofessional," to which I got berated for.
At least you're being honest.
No, you definitely need to hire. Now, interestingly enough, Michael did his own covers, but Michael spent years we ran an advertising agency. He was the creative director. He knows how to make great covers. And in fact, when people look at the covers of his self-published works, a lot of people say, well, I like those even better than the traditional ones. So,
but he didn't just scribble it on a piece of paper,
right? That doesn't generally happen. So yes, you do have to hire, cover design. And also you have to
say in his covers now. Does he get any say in his covers now with the traditional?
So that's one of the problems with traditional publishing. I mean, when we saw the covers that Orbit produced, we were not happy. We did not have any control over them. We had no say over them. We were not able to get any changes made. Now, I will say this: they're professional looking. I mean, it's not like someone hand drew something and they look like they were. I mean, they're very high. I mean, if you were to look in a bookstore and look at the other books like them, they fit in well with them. They used very expensive artists. They were very professionally done. They just weren't too art. Part of the problem was, from a marketing perspective, they thought it was very important to show the main characters on the books, and the people they used didn't look anything like the characters. And not only that, but but not only that, like from a kind of philosophical standpoint, we prefer not to show the cover, the faces of the people, because we want everyone to kind of have their own imaginings of what the person looked like. Mm-hmm. So we would kind of disagree with, putting the covers on the book for that reason. Now with the new contract, we get more of a say, but it's not we can't veto, It's one of those things where we won't know until it's done, whether, it was a better experience or not. We at least do have some contractual language that allows us to do some stuff with covers. What was really interesting was the Hollow World cover, because the Hollow World, we had actually, when Mike first wrote that, I actually did a Kickstarter for it, and I hired my favorite artist to do that cover. His name's Mark Simonetti, and he's done covers for Michael and George R. R. Martin and Brandon Sanderson and Patrick Rothfuss and Terry Pratchett, all the big fantasy people. And so we hired him to do the covers, and we had kind of control over it, and so that worked out fine. Now for the print edition, again, Tachyon had that, and the cover that they produced, also using Mark's artwork, by the way, but in a way that I totally did not like. It was horrific. I mean, I could not even imagine that cover being in the bookstores. And it was so bad, in fact, that I was willing to buy back the contract.
Oh my God.
Because I was like, I just can't have that cover out there. Now, because they were a smaller publisher, and Michael, was a fairly large author for them, we had a lot more leverage, and we actually got them to use the cover that we wanted. They actually adopted our cover and ended up using it. So in a small publisher, you have more say over covers. In large publishers, you have next to no say over covers. And in a lot of cases,
fantasy, I think the covers are very important. I write fantasy, and that was something that I spent a lot of money on, was my covers, because it's half the journey for the reader is, what awesome cover are they coming up with next? Yeah, they're really important. And that's one of the. Now, the nice thing with Michael's first series is, because he had done all his covers originally, in some respects, I mean, the stance he took, like when we saw the covers, I mean, I was outraged. I was like, going back to the whole, I care more than Michael cares. Like, I was like, oh, how could they do this cover? And it's terrible. But from Mike's perspective, he was like, well, they've already been released looking the way I wanted them to look. So I already have what I wanted. So at this point, they can do whatever the heck they want. As long as the sales are good, he didn't really care what they did to the covers. So he wasn't nearly as upset about them as I was, but I was pretty I was pretty upset.
Well, here's a question, because we keep moving on. Have you thought about do you help others? Like, if there was an author out there listening to this now going, oh, Robin sounds awesome, I'd love for her to do my stuff. Do you offer that?
I have to say, Robin does sound awesome.
I know. So I can see, this is why I've asked that question, because I'm picturing Dion going, I might email Robin later.
Oh no, I wouldn't do that.
Is this something that you think about, or even further on, have you considered writing a book about this for yourself and publish it yourself and saying, this is the business of writing?
So there's a couple of things. One is I do lectures here in the Washington, D.C. area. Matter of fact, I have one tomorrow. There's a library, and I think tomorrow's topic is marketing for your book launch. And I usually get about 60 to 70 people come up to those, and they're free. I just, come on down and listen to it, and I do them. A lot of the blog posts that Mike, quote unquote, writes on the business side are actually ghost written by me. There was an article for Writer's Digest that we did in the February edition. It was on Goodreads. And I mean, his name is on it because everyone knows who he is, but I wrote it. We're doing Michael did it's funny, Michael did a presentation. He did several presentations at the Writer's Digest annual conference last year. And I I produced the slideshows, and I went over them with him, and so he knew what to say and so forth. And he went up and he did them and so forth. But he was doing one of them, and he got partway through it, and he was just kind of floundering. And finally, he just pulled me out of the audience and put me up in front. And so we kind of joint did that, at the end. A lot of people ask to quote unquote hire me. I will never do it, and I'll tell you why. There are so many people that are kind of picking at the pockets of authors that I don't want to be looked upon as one of those people. I do a lot of pro bono stuff. There was an author at Michael's writing group, and really good writer. The group really likes his stuff. He was in a really bad situation with an agent, and they were kind of fighting over stuff, and he wanted to self-publish this work and so forth. And he had a horrific cover, and he didn't know how to make an ebook, and he didn't know how to write marketing copy. And so Mike drew a cover for him. I mean, it took him like an hour, so he did a cover for him for free, and I did the ebook formatting for him for free. And then I showed him how to get it up on Amazon and the various things. And I've done this a lot. I mean, there's a lot of people that I've kind of, when a sad case comes my way, I mean, if they're a good writer, I'm not going to spend my time for someone who can't write, I mean.
Yeah, put a disclaimer on that.
Too is there are resources out there, like you can join Facebook groups. See, this is why social media is good for authors, because this is how I learned how to do stuff. I got on social media and I met other authors who had done it before me, and you gather knowledge and you ask questions, and authors are a very supportive group. Very
the self-published ones are, without question. I mean, there are, the Kindle boards, the Writers Cafe Kindle boards, lots of great help there. There are Facebook groups. Like I said, I've written, I can't even think of how many articles I've written on things like writing query letters and dealing with contracts. Amazing Stories magazine, Mike has a byline in there where we write on the business side of writing. And a couple of those articles are his, and a couple of them are ghost written by me. But we do a lot of articles. My bottom line is I probably will do a book, but it has to be for free. I mean, I can't even think of charging for it. Like I'm definitely going to be doing a book. There's 2 books that I'm going to be working on in the near term. One is for launching a successful Kickstarter. I'm about to go live with Mike's second Kickstarter here any day now. His first Kickstarter did very well. We wanted to raise, our goal was to raise $3,000, which was like half of what we thought we needed for this project. We thought, well, we'll put in half. We'll ask the readers to put in half, and that will be good. And that turned out funding at like $32,000.
Wow. But can I ask a question? Why would you do that when you're earning so much money out of it anyway?
Well, in the case of the Kickstarter, it was to prove a point. We wanted to see if it was possible, because I know a lot of traditionally published authors who have books that they've shopped around and no publisher picked them up. And I said, well, why don't you self-publish it? And they said, well, I can't afford to do, I don't have the money to do the, the editing, some of them design and so forth.
Yeah. Because even if they're selling,
but they already have audiences. So I said, why don't you do a Kickstarter? Right. Well, so I said to them, I said, why don't you do a Kickstarter? And they're like, Kickstarters don't work. I said, you've already traditionally published. A Kickstarter will work for you. And they go, no, it won't. So we did the Kickstarter to prove to some of these traditionally published friends of ours that it can work. Now, the next one I'm doing, the one that I'm about to launch, the reason why I'm doing it is because I want to do, I want a hardcover edition of this book. I want to do a hardcover run. And I kind of ran all my numbers, and it's going to cost about $32,000.
Wow.
I can't fund $32,000.
That's a lot of money.
We make good money, but our money comes far and in between, right? I mean, like, any money in the last 8 months or something like that, because, royalties did come in. So we get every 6 months we get some money.
Yeah, I have to say that, take note, people who want traditional publishing, it is a long time between checks.
Yes, very long. So, I can't fund $32,000 on my own. Now I figure I can do like $8,000. So so what I did is I'm going to do the Kickstarter for like $26,000, and I'm going to cover the rest. So I'm going to cover like I'm covering the cover design and the editing and all that type of stuff. Now, if the Kickstarter doesn't fund, I just won't have hardcovers. The book will still come out because I have the money for the other aspects.
So you're testing demand, really. That's what you're doing. You're testing the demand for the product.
I am. And not only that, but it's great for pre-book buzz. I mean, it's a tremendous marketing out, because people are talking. Like for Hollow World, the book we kickstarted the first time around, one of the perks that those people got is they got their hands on the book. Well, originally the plan was to get it in their hands 6 months before the book went out to the public. But because Tachyon couldn't get it out fast enough, it turned out to be more like 9 months, because we originally wanted to release in January and they had to release in April because that's as fast as they could do it. So we had people, we had 850 people who had got their hands on the book in, I guess it was September, and had been talking about the book, through September and October and November and December and January and February. So when the book launched in April, I mean, it had a tremendous, anticipation. It was, yeah. So there's a lot of reasons for doing a Kickstarter. The Kickstarter isn't just for money. I mean, it's for promotion. It's because people love being a part of it. I mean, the people who are involved in the Hollow World, I mean, they've got posters on their walls that they framed, and they've got, they got all kinds of like cool little things that I just can't do outside of a Kickstarter. So they get all kinds of little T-shirts, people get to have T-shirts. It's really hard to do T-shirts without kind of like, you got to have a big order, right? So, for me to like try and guess like what the sizes and colors will be, and then do a run, and then have some shirts sitting around that might never sell, it doesn't make much sense. But with a Kickstarter, I know I have 300 T-shirts, and these are the sizes and these are the colors, and I can place that order at a reasonable cost. So there's a lot of good reasons for doing Kickstarters. But it's the money is nice, but it's really not the primary aspect that I deal with Kickstarter. And in a lot of cases, the last Kickstarter was to prove to traditionally published authors that they can fund their stuff and be successful. And for this next Kickstarter, what I'm going to try and prove, and I don't know whether I'll work or not, but I would like to see, because usually you can't get self-published books in bookstores. And if I can do a print run, and I'm paying for a distribution partner, which is a fairly expensive thing to set up too. But if I do that, I think there's a pretty good chance that even though this is going to be a self-published book, it's going to be in bookstores in hardcover. And again, if I can do that, I kind of like, I trod the path first to see that it can work, and then I can write about how I did it, and then others will hopefully follow.
Well, if you get that book out, please, we'd love to have you back on. We might be able to give a couple away. One final question before we do a couple of short segments is that what's the one big tip you'd give to a new writer out there?
So the big tip, and this is the thing that you can't get around. Number one is you have to write a book. You have to write a good book. And by good, I'm going to define that as a book that when someone gets done reading, they want to buy more of your books. And two, they want to tell everyone they know about the book. So you have to do that. If you can't do that, you're going to be operating from a huge deficit. But the second part is that once you have that book, I don't care whether you go traditional or self, but it has to be professionally produced. It has to, a self-published book has to be twice as good from a cover design and copy editing to get half the credit. If you find, there are typos in Mike's traditionally published books. There's a typo in every traditionally published book I've ever seen. They happen. When you have 130,000 words, there's going to be a typo somewhere. It's just going to happen. But when someone is reading a traditional published book and they come across a typo, they go, "Oh, isn't this interesting? I found something that the editors meant. Haha, this is cool." Yeah. When you have a typo in a self-published book, it's like, aha, there it is. Yeah. They don't spend time or money on editors. Well, yes, they did. They spent lots of time and lots of money on editors, but you know what? Sometimes they slip through. Just because you find an error doesn't mean that professional people didn't work on it. So, you have to be twice as good to get half the credit. when you're self-published.
Well, I think the other tip to add is people can, email us anytime at podcast@newbiewriters.com, but please don't email me saying, put me in touch with Robin. I've got a sob story. Yes,
I'm pretty easy to find. Like, one of the things that Michael does, now this totally is Michael's, because I can't do anything about this, but like one of the things that Michael does is he's got something called the first 5 pages. Mm-hmm. And people will send him in their first 5 pages and he'll give them a critique on it. And he doesn't do it for like everybody. Like, it depends on how many come in a month. Like if there's a few that come in, he does every one that comes in. If there's a lot that comes in, he'll pick 4 or 5 of them and does them and stuff. For the Kickstarter that we're about to do, something interesting, which is we want to spotlight a new or aspiring author. So what we're having is a little short story contest. And so people can submit their short stories and their cover letter. And everyone will get their cover letter critiqued by either me or Michael. But if the cover letter interests us, then we will read the short story. And if we read the short story, we will critique the short story. But one person is going to get picked, and we're going to pay more than twice the pro rate for anthologies. The pro rate here is 6 cents a word, which that's ridiculous. It shouldn't be a pro rate, but that's what it is. But we're paying 15 cents a word for up to 5,000 words. So the winner will get $750. They will have their story structural edited by me and Michael. We will pay for the copy editors to go through it. And then it will be bundled in with his book. So the 30,000 to 100,000 readers of Michael's book will read their story.
That is, you cannot buy that.
No. And there's nothing, like, I'm doing this as part of the Kickstarter, but you don't have to contribute to the Kickstarter to do this. I mean, it's just, that's a way that's very easy for me to put a call out for submissions and get a lot of people in there. So it's in the Kickstarter. But it's, we do a lot to try and give back to new authors, traditionally published authors, self-published authors. We've learned a lot, and we try and do what we can. So
there's that mentality again of authors helping authors.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Self-published author, people who came up to the self-publishing rank, are very, very, they totally share what they've learned and, what worked for them and so forth. And traditionally published authors, the culture there is a little more tight-lipped. Like, like when I was trying to figure out contracts and stuff, I would be, I'd be like, what does your non-compete say? And interesting, most of the authors said, I don't have a non-compete. I said, oh, I think you do.
I didn't read
it. And then they would look at their contract. I said, look at paragraph 16. And they read it and they go, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was here. Why didn't my agent say something?
Obviously, they trust too many people. They don't do it themselves, so they're a bit, they know how to write.
A bit naive.
That's about it. Yeah, naive.
Well, yeah, and the agent wants it signed. They don't get any money if you don't sign it. So,
well,
I could tell a whole thing on that side of the business, but they don't know as much because they're not having the hands-on, and what they do know, they've kind of been told, like, well, we don't talk about money, or we don't talk about clauses, or we don't talk about this or that,
Yes,
because
does that benefit?
Well, they're very much afraid that, they'll get their publishers mad at them. I got to tell you, there were more than a few times that at various stages when I was upset at one thing or another that our publisher did, that I kind of said things publicly. And, the publisher called my agent, and the agent called Michael and me, and, started putting our feet to the fire. And I said, look, if you don't want to get called out for doing stupid things, don't do stupid things.
Yeah,
exactly.
I love it. I love
that. Should be the motto of my life.
And they said, well, you really shouldn't say that. Your contract, you have a non-disclosure thing. I said, actually, I don't. I know every word in my contract, and I know what's in there, what's not. But see, most traditionally published authors are afraid that they would get their publishers mad at them and they won't get the next series picked up. Yeah. If they don't pick it up, I have other alternatives. So, but I'm not going to keep quiet on, on things.
Well, to stop our listeners hyperventilating over that small competition, where can people find that? Is there a link out there that people can track
Yeah.
down?
So so I'm going to be putting up I'll probably be putting up a link tomorrow. Saturdays is my Authors Helping Authors segment on Michael's web, on his website, which is www.riyria.com. That's Ryira. That's the name of his series. And on Saturdays, they always do Authors Helping Authors. And sometimes I spotlight an author, or sometimes I talk about something that another author is doing for someone that's really good, or if someone's doing a Kickstarter, I'll mention their Kickstarter. So I'm going to do one of those tomorrow. There's also an article that came out last Monday in Amazing Story magazine, and it's Authors Helping Authors. If you Googled Amazing Stories magazine and Michael J. Sullivan, it's the very last one on his byline, and it gives you all the details. But I'll be posting that tomorrow. And then, of course, when the Kickstarter goes live, there'll be all kinds of information in the Kickstarter about it. So, and I've posted it out at a number of forums. Like I posted about it at SFF World and Fantasy Faction, and on Reddit in like the writing sub, and also on the Our Fantasy sub of Reddit. So I've posted it in many places, so people may already know about it. And please, if you guys, writers out there, if you're hanging in various writer-ish Facebook pages or, groups or whatever, post about it as well. But that should be up on his website tomorrow.
Sweet. We'll have those on our show notes as well. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Robin. We could probably talk to you for about 5 hours. Well, I can't do that.
I know I have so many questions. We have to do this again.
I think so.
We can always have me back. I do a lot of these, so think of a topic or just a free-for-all or whatever you want to do. I'll definitely come back.
That'd be awesome. And look, if anyone out there, podcast@newbiewriters.com, please send questions in. If it's for Robin, just say, hey, put it in the title, question for Robin, and we might pull them together and we can see if we can get you back on.
Sure.
Now, is there anyone you want to give a shout out to?
A shout out to. So there's a Kickstarter running right now. Oh, I guess I should be prepared for this because I just funded it.
See, we put our guests on the spot. We never tell them we can do the shout out. This is why we like to make them feel awkward. So
yeah. So there's a Kickstarter right now. It's based, if you type in heroic fantasy and on Kickstarter, you'll find it. It's got a great lineup of authors, some of the best fantasy authors in the industry. They're really close to funding. Maybe they're already funded now. But when I saw it, I backed it immediately. I back a lot of Kickstarters. I love Kickstarters. Also, and I'm gonna really butcher this name. Well, I'll do two. The traditionally published author right now who's got a book out that I think is just wonderful is Naomi Novik. Her new book, Uprooted, which I think just came out this week. Fabulous book. Go out and get it. From a kind of lesser known author, I would say Bradley Bowler. And he has a new book coming out called The 12 Kings of Sharakai. Excellent book. He was kind of published through some of the smaller presses, and he just recently got a nice contract with DAW, and it's DAW who's putting this out. I think this is going to help elevate him, and I think he's an author who really deserves to be elevated. He's been kind of low mid list, and I think he's up and coming, and we'll be doing really well for that. And then, the shout out for the self-published authors, I say, sign up for this contest because I think it's going to be a great opportunity, and hopefully we'll have someone we can shine a spotlight on.
Well, it sounds like a fantastic idea. So yes, it's been good to have you on. We've just got a couple of things we're going to do before we wrap up. Each week we do a prompt for those authors out there that like to have a bit of a prompt and a writing exercise. So this week's one is, what is your favorite thing to do? What if you did it all day? What if you couldn't stop? Actually, that would be really bad. You'd probably get a sore arm. What would the unintended consequences of pure pleasure and delight be?
Well, we're all writers. I think writing would be the answer to that, and we would end up with some more of our book done.
Oh, so chafing wouldn't be the right term to use?
No.
Oh, right. Wrong show. Sorry. Forgot I was on the other one. Yeah, favourite thing to do? I don't know. Sleeping at the moment. Sleeping is my favourite thing to do. If I did it all day, I'd be very relaxed and probably not as angry, All right, we'll do a word of the week. This came from Arlene Miller's Weird and Wonderful Words series, bigwords101.com. And this is kachidrosis. Right. We've heard of halitosis. This one is the same, but your whole body.
Oh,
Oh.
gross.
A bit like when you walk into certain fish and chip shops here. Ooh.
There's always one person at the supermarket.
I know. What do you do? Like, or if, in my case, I deal with a lot of clients, one-to-one or whatever, and there's just the odd one. You shake their hand, you're like, oh, you need to change the deodorant because it's not working.
Or you need to start using some.
Yes. Anyway, I wear two just
in
out
case.
there, just in case. Unless they're cancelling each other out, then we've got a real problem. All right. That'll do it. Thank you for coming on, Dion. Is there anyone you want to give a shout out to? Do a bit of a spruik. Come on.
Not really. Just Booktastic. Readers sign up to Booktastic for free, and you will get great recommendations on ebooks that are for sale. And that's about it, really.
Is there a top pick on Booktastic for this week?
Oh, is there a top? Oh, now you've put me on the spot.
Yes.
Okay. We've got a good free book up. It's on the front page of Booktastic, and it's Booktastic with a K at the end.com. Wicked Wind by Sharon Kay is a romantic fantasy book, and it's free.
Oh.
It's free at the moment until, when is it? It's free until the 29th of May, and you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Apple, and Smashwords.
Fantastic. All right. Well, next week, I have no idea who's on. That's Catherine's domain, but she should be back. So thanks to Robin. Thanks to Dion. It's been good. And until next week, we'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Your book starts here on the Newbie Writers Podcast.